Hi, and welcome back to Scholastically Natalie. If you are new here, welcome. um, if you're returning for another video, awesome. This might be a little bit different from the usual style. So, as we all know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on September 18th of this year, at the age of 87, which is admirable, from complications of metastatic pancreatic cancer. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know a lot about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, before, we never learned about her in school, and, I honestly hadn't really heard of her except, seeing stuff in some stores that are more, pop culture-y that featured things made about her, and I was always kind of like, oh yeah, I'll have to learn about her. And so then when she passed, I did get that opportunity, and I think that even if we don't agree with everything she did or don't agree with everything she said, she was still a really inspirational and very cool lady who definitely deserves to be remembered with a lot of respect for pretty much sticking to what she believed in and fighting for it for her entire life. So I have here what Columbia Law School put out in honor of her 25th anniversary, I think, being on the bench. I'll double check. So, you're looking at what is called Sincerely Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's a collection of various writings and snippets of what she did. It says here that this is Columbia Law School's official portrait of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg from 1959, unveiled in 2001, painted by Constance P. Beatty. Yes, on the 25th anniversary of her investiture to the Supreme Court, Columbia Law School is for the first time publishing a portion of its previously private papers. So here's kind of like a preface. There is very little about the indomitable Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 59, that hasn't already been chronicled in films, books, magazine profiles, news stories, and even song. A leading architect of the modern-day women's movement and the fight for gender equality, Justice Ginsburg has made her mark over decades as a brilliant legal strategist and litigator. Her advocacy and jurisprudence have transformed the legal landscape. In 1993, she ascended to the pinnacle of the profession when she was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States by President Bill Clinton. Now a pop culture icon known as Notorious RGB, she holds a rarefied place in American history. She also stands alone in the history of Columbia Law School. Justice Ginsburg graduated tied for first in the class of 1959 and shattered a glass ceiling when, in 1972, she became the first woman to join the school as a tenured faculty member. The Columbia archives contain letters, remarks, and memos to university presidents, law school deans, and colleagues, as well as their replies. These documents illuminate Justice Ginsburg's fierce intelligence, sharp legal mind, and lifetime commitment to gender equality and women's rights in her personal and professional lives. They also reveal the deep respect and affection she expresses for her colleagues, mentors, friends, and family. To honor Justice Ginsburg on the 25th anniversary of her investiture to the Supreme Court, Columbia Law School is for the first time publishing a portion of its previously private papers. These materials are eloquent and emphatic testimony to her unparalleled influence on the institution and to the enduring bond she and the Columbia community share to this day. Sounds like some sucking up from Columbia. Okay, so here's a quote from her where it says, "I'm very proud of my Columbia degree and politely declined to trade it in for one from Harvard when that became an option years later." This is from August 5th, 1980, remarks delivered at Columbia Law School Alumni Association reception and dinner in Honolulu, Hawaii. After Ginsburg completed her first 2 years at Harvard Law School, she decided to move to New York City because her husband, Marty, who had recently graduated from Harvard Law, landed a job as a tax lawyer with Whale, Gottschall, and Mengs. Harvard, Ginsburg said, informed her that if she took the third year of law school at another school, it would be out of the question for her to receive a Harvard degree. She challenged the logic of that decision by arguing that the school awarded degrees to its transfer students who also spent only 2 years there. If Harvard ruled years 1 and 2 would not do for a degree, what could I expect from Columbia, she worried at the time. Fortunately, Columbia had no rule, and she was accepted without reservation. In 1959, she was not only awarded a Columbia Law School degree, but also tied for first in her graduating class. Years later, in 2011, she accepted an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from Harvard. Here the quote says, "The suggested amendments marked in red on the enclosures might stimulate women graduates to respond more favorably to your fund appeals." This is from December 17th, 1971. It's a letter to Columbia Law School Annual Fund Office. Ginsburg took a red pen to the solicitation letter she received from the national co-chairman of Columbia Law School's 21st Annual Fund, while she was a professor of law at Rutgers University. After adding "or her" wherever the letter's authors had used his, she mailed the edited version back to the law school with the politely worded cover note. My gosh, that's actually really funny. I can't imagine doing that. Yeah, if you can't see, there's only 2 marks from this photocopy. I can't imagine doing that. That's really funny. Okay, here's another quote. "I was introduced as the first of many women professors the faculty expects to have. Although it will be difficult to live up to the advance notices, I look forward to my Columbia association with much enthusiasm." That is from February 10th, 1972, from a letter to Columbia University President William J. McGill. On January 21st, 1972, Columbia Law School Dean Michael I. Sovereign, class of 1955, announced to the faculty that Ginsburg had accepted an appointment as a professor of law, the first woman to join the law school as a full-time tenured professor. This news reverberated beyond the academy and legal community. "Columbia Law snares a prize in the quest for women professors," read the headline in the New York Times on January 26, 1972, which called the appointment a major coup. Here's the next quote. "Over the years, many women have ranked among the law school's most distinguished graduates. Yet until now, no serious effort was made to recruit obviously qualified women for faculty positions. That record is no accident." That's from March 1st, 1972, in a letter to Columbia University President William J. McGill. 6 weeks after accepting Columbia Law's offer to join the faculty, but 4 months before the appointment began, Ginsburg chastised the university's president for comments he made in an interview with the New York Times about federal and opportunity regulations that would compel Columbia to consider race and sex when making employment decisions. Ginsburg was upset that McGill had insinuated that she was an affirmative action hire. "It conveys an impression I am sure you did not intend," she wrote on letterhead from Rutgers University, where she was still teaching. Oh, and here's the actual letter. So it says, "Dear Dr. McGill, the New York Times report, February 27, 1972, page 25, conveys an impression I am sure you did not intend. The concluding remarks attributed to you appear to put the emphasis in the wrong place. Over the years, many women have ranked among the law school's most distinguished graduates, yet until now no serious effort was made to recruit obviously qualified women for faculty positions. That record is no accident. Women candidates with pride in their achievements do not seek reverse discrimination. They respect independent-minded colleagues, but independent-minded is an inappropriate characterization for a mental set still prevalent that assumes the superiority of male candidates. Mr. Podinger? Yes, Podinger, attempted to explain the government's position in a comment that appeared in the New York Times on December 18, 1971, page 29. The idea that qualifications are the primary standard for hiring is at the heart of executive order that's HEW enforces. Description of the women's movement as narrowly based reflects a misunderstanding. Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme put it this way: in order that women shall be emancipated from their antiquated role, the men must also be emancipated. Thus as human beings we shall emancipate. And then the next sentence doesn't get an ending, so I'm not going to read it. Which, she advocates, if you've watched the Vindication of Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft, she's advocating for very similar things that we talked about in those videos. I'll try to remember to link them to below. But she's here still talking about how even though, yes, you are trying to, bring equality into women and, do that, you still have to also raise men out of the belief that women are lesser than them, which, is true. Okay, so then here's our next quote. When Edith and I first met, I was astonished. This trailblazer was petite as can be, even smaller in size than I am. Her example persuaded me that one need not have an imposing bearing or a loud voice to be an effective lawyer, and a steadfast contributor to the welfare of the communities law exists to serve. I count it my great good fortune to have known her as my sympathetic older sister-in-law. September 14th, 2005. Tribute to Edith Spivak, class of 1932. Spivak was one of the pioneering women who enrolled at Columbia Law School in 1929, after it had begun accepting women just 3 years earlier in 1926. After graduating in 1932, Spivak was rejected by law firms, she said, because she was a woman and she was Jewish, 2 obstacles Ginsburg also faced. So Spivak volunteered at the New York City Law Department before she was hired there, initially at half salary, in 1934 as an assistant corporation counsel. She became a legend in the legal community, serving with distinction at the law department for 70 years and retiring at the age of 94. Spivak was a role model for Ginsburg. The two were often together at various bar and Columbia Law School gatherings. Edith was a truly grand human being, she told Dean David M. Scheiser in a letter. Okay, so here is the letter that she sent. Dear family, friends, and colleagues of Edith Spivak, were the first Monday less close, I would surely be with you this afternoon to celebrate the life of a truly great lady and lawyer, Edith Spivak. Edith graduated from Columbia Law School the year before I was born. It was a time few women were bold enough to aspire to careers at the bar. Decades later, when I graduated from Columbia Law School, Edith was already a model for the women who followed in her way. When Edith and I first met, I was astonished. This trailblazer was petite as can be, even smaller in size than I am. Her example persuaded me that one need not have an imposing bearing or a loud voice to be an effective lawyer and a steadfast contributor to the welfare of the communities law exists to serve. Throughout her years at the bar, Edith ranked amongst the most dedicated, the least selfish of those privileged to engage in the practice of law. I count it my great good fortune to have known her as my sympathetic older sister-in-law. May all gathered here continue to draw inspiration from her work and days. And then, here's another quote. In those days I was rather diffident, modest, and shy. Hans was the ideal person to help me overcome those traits. He encouraged me to speak in public, to write for law journals, even to take over his civil procedure class for a week. He was my rabbi in 1972 when Columbia at last decided tenured women belonged on the faculty. From May 10th, 2001. Introduction of Professor Hans Smit, class of 1958 at Columbia Law School Alumni Association dinner in Washington, D.C. Hans Smit was a world-renowned authority on international arbitration who was a professor from 1960 until his death in 2012. He led Columbia's project on international procedure and in 1961 hired Ginsburg as a researcher and associate director. She admired Smit as a scholar and mentor and greatly appreciated his many talents and personal passions. His fluency in several languages, his water polo championships, his collector's eye for all manner of fine art, his skill as a bargainer, his astute in real estate acquisitions, and remarkable buildings and home renovations. She remained in close touch with Smit over the years, as she did with many Columbia professors who became valued colleagues, mentors, and friends. And here is the notes. Well, a letter. We have just endured the heaviest work season at the court, the weeks when all opinions not yet out, opinions in about half the terms argued cases, must be completed and released before we leave town. It is a time to stick close to one's desk. But when I received the announcement of tonight's dinner, I had no will to resist. I immediately mailed in my reservation and volunteered to welcome the evening's distinguished speaker, the inimitable Hans Smit. And then, of course, the next sentence trails off. And then, on this next page, we have another quote. When I joined the Columbia Law School faculty in 1972, it was understood that no meetings associated with the law school would be held at clubs that discriminate in admissions on the basis of race, religion, national origin, or sex. I am surprised that the D.C. Columbia Law Group is insensitive on the issue. That is from October 10th, 1986, in a letter to the president of the Columbia Law School Alumni Association of Washington, D.C. Since the 1970s, Ginsburg had advocated for women's full membership in civic, professional, and business associations that had welcomed only male members. She not only protested when American Law Institute and Columbia University held events at the all-male Century Association in New York City, but she also fought to change the association's discriminatory policy. In a detailed 1979 memorandum, she wrote, "If women are not offered equal access, if they are not welcomed as full members of the club, they are kept away from a traditional avenue for self-development, economic, and political opportunity and advancement. After receiving Ginsburg's pointed letter objecting to a planned luncheon at the men-only Cosmos Club, the law school's director of development responded that, as soon as we heard the news about the Cosmos Club, a fast switch was arranged. And then here's a letter to that president, where it says, Dear Peter, when I joined the Columbia Law School faculty in 1972, it was understood that no meetings associated with the law school would be held at clubs that discriminate in admissions on the basis of race, religion, national origin, or sex. Other groups with which I am affiliated, for example, the American Law Institute, see enclosure, follow the same policy. Has the Cosmos Club opened admissions to women? If not, I am distressed that CLSAAWDC has scheduled a lunch program for SEC Commissioner Edward H. Pleischman, October 23, 1986, at that place and suggest an immediate change of venue. P.S. I continue to protest when invitations like the enclosed one from CLSAAWDC arrive, to the annoyance of friends and acquaintances, even former faculty colleagues. Georgetown University Law Center dropped lunches at the Cosmos Club some years back, and even the ABA meets at the International Club instead. I am surprised that the DC Columbia Law Alumni Group is insensitive on the issue. This is the first time in 6 years I received a notice that the Columbia Law people are meeting at the Cosmos Club. And here's another quote. I believe we are the first mother-daughter law school teaching team. From 1994 in the Columbia Law School Reunion Questionnaire. As an engaged member of the law school alumni community, Ginsburg has attended reunions and faithfully contributed class notes. In a 1999 questionnaire, she wrote that her most memorable law school moment was her own graduation. Now Columbia Law professor Jane C. Ginsburg, then age 4, called out from a Kent Library balcony seat as I received my diploma. That's my mommy. This photo from the collection of the Supreme Court of the United States shows an exuberant Jane with her mom and dad the summer after her father's graduation. In 1994, Ginsburg proudly reported that Jane had been named the Morton L. Janklow Professor of Literary and Artistic Property Law. Teaching at Columbia was a family affair. Jane's father and Ginsburg's husband, Marty, was a professor at the law school from 1978 to 1980. Sorry, friends, we had to pause for a drink. I owe it all to my secretary at Columbia Law School, who said, I'm typing all these briefs and articles for you, and the word sex, sex, sex is on every page. Don't you know that those 9 men on the Supreme Court, when they hear that word, that their first association is not what you want them to be thinking about? Why don't you use the word gender? This is from November 19th, 1993, Columbia Law Women's Association discussion on landmark sex discrimination cases. Ginsburg has always credited her astute secretary, Millicent Tyron, for suggesting she replace the word sex with the word gender in discussion of discrimination and civil rights. Tyron's I don't know why that got switched around for me. Reasoning was straightforward and sound. It is a grammatical term, and it will ward off distracting associations. Little did they know that at the time a one-word substitution would forever change the language of the law. It was exciting to have you at Columbia. You were a role model, a conscientious a consciousness raiser, and inspiration to students and staff. You made some people here think differently about themselves, and you paid the price. One after another, your secretaries quit to go to law school. It's from March 15th, 1983. It's a letter from Rosalind Rosenthal, Assistant Dean of Faculty. Rosenthal, who started her career at Columbia Law School as a secretary, went on to become an associate dean. When I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I should come up with something worthy of her impact on American society, she recalled. Instead, I see her sudden, lovely smile as she dips into my candy jar to fortify herself for the next 8 hours of work. And then this is a letter from the assistant dean. When I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I should come up with something worthy of her impact. Oh, it's literally the exact same writing. Okay, and the next quote says, every single word she uttered was brilliant and precisely to the point. She was operating on an intellectual plane that was just far above all of us. But it also made us want to aspire to whatever excellence we had in our capacity to achieve. It's from November 19th, 1993. It's remarks by Lynn Hecht Schafran, class of 1974, at a discussion hosted by the Columbia Law Women's Association in honor of Justice Ginsburg appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. Schafran was a student in Ginsburg's sex discrimination law seminar and worked with her on a number of cases on behalf of the ACLU Women's Rights Project. Soon after she graduated and while working at a large New York City firm, Schafran received a call from Ginsburg asking her to work on a Supreme Court case involving sex discrimination in high schools, an issue they had worked on together while at Columbia Law. I really thought I had died and gone to heaven, because what could be more of a compliment than to be invited to work on a case by Justice Ginsburg? I was speechless with gratitude. With Ginsburg as her mentor and friend, Schafran went on to become a leading expert on gender equality and was an original member of the American Bar Association Commission on Women in the Profession. She currently serves as director of the National Judicial Education Program at Legal Momentum. Okay, the next quote. I tender my resignation from my Columbia post effective at the close of the business date, June 30th, 1980. It has been a special privilege to hold a tenured position at Columbia. This is from June 25th, 1980, letter to Columbia University President Michael I. Sovereign, class of 1955. Ginsburg was appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in June 1980. In her resignation letter, she noted that she would enter on duty July 1st, 1980. Apparently, she had no intention of taking a day off between leaving the academy on a Monday afternoon and officially assuming her new judicial duties the next day. The additional lines from the letter say, it has been a special privilege to hold a tenured position at Columbia, and with best wishes for the continuing excellence of this great university. Oh, and this is the final page. The Columbia law community is forever indebted to Justice Ginsburg for the myriad ways she has shaped and strengthened the school for more than half a century. She has inspired generations of women and men to challenge the status quo and strive for excellence. Even after joining the federal judiciary, Justice Ginsburg has unfailingly continued to enrich the life of the law school as an engaged alumna, a former faculty member, and a mentor to dozens of Columbia Law graduates who have served as law clerks in her chambers and then gone on to become leaders in the legal profession. As a justice on our nation's highest court for 25 years, Justice Ginsburg has epitomized the core values of Columbia Law School and embodies the ideals of American democracy. And then there are some acknowledgments. Columbia Law School wishes to thank the Supreme Court's Public Information Office for its assistance with this publication. We also extend a special thanks to Columbia University Archives, and this is from 2018. So, hopefully we've learned a little bit more about Bader Ginsburg as a person. I feel like we all have a vague idea of, like, you know, the fact that she was so determined to just do what she could and just push forward despite everybody else kind of like telling her no. Like, that's how she got the name Notorious RBG. I was looking for something to read for this video, and at first I was like, oh, maybe I can read like some of her writings, but I looked at the legal briefs, like the different opinions she gave and like the dissents and like the agreements, and I had no idea which ones went to which, and I didn't want to have to sort through them all because there's so many. She wrote a lot, guys. But she accomplished so much, and like she seemed like an exceedingly well-meaning and determined person who really paved the way for a lot of women to go into law and be successful with law, and pushed forward so much on sex discrimination. And I mean, honestly, it's so impressive of her to have fought through her different bouts of cancer to continue her work as a judge too. Like, I don't know, she is an intense and very cool lady. I will leave a link to the ACLU in the description if you'd like to donate. I bought a shirt off of them once I heard the news, because I'd like to help support them. I think they do really great work, and she worked with them for quite a bit to help them with all their different cases, and they're the kind of people that I can get behind. So, let me know if you enjoyed this. Sorry if I didn't offer, like, a ton of commentary. I feel like this isn't something we should commentate on a ton. She clearly had an awesome sense of humor and, you know, a way to use that humor to kind of like point out the fallacies of those around us. And like, she was not afraid of essentially walking up to a boss and being like, hey, I hope you didn't mean this the way you phrased it. Which I, as a relatively anxious and mildly unconfident human, cannot even start to comprehend, and I find very, very incredible. I don't know, she definitely held her own, and I don't know, man, it is a shame to have lost her, but we can kind of celebrate what she was aiming for and what she has done for us, and send well wishes to her family. And that's what I'll be doing. So, thanks for listening to this video. I'll leave some links. I'll link this in the description as well in case you want to look at it. If you want to go look at Colombia a bit more, that's good with me too. So, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting or found something new to think about. And let me know if you enjoyed this style of video or not. Scholastically Natalie.